Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory unto our power, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachak Wadash. Double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who taught us his truth and who also were well. Peace and salutation to those that are hopeful elect. Just want to do a lesson, all right, entitled M.O.T.B will be a global culture shock. Okay. And pretty much, we're in, the elites, all right, the 1% bankers, the ones that are controlling the whole entire earth. Okay. And they mainly do it, through finances. All right. But the elites, all right, they're the ones that are, dictating, the direction or the path, all right, that this society is moving in. All right. They're the ones that's pushing, the technological leap. All right. The fourth industrial revolution. Okay. They're the ones that's pushing it. Okay. And, as you can see from the infrastructure now, all right, the beast infrastructure is already in place. Okay. And what they're doing is they're trying to phase out, the old way of doing things. Okay. And the new way of doing things, everything is hooked up to the Internet of Things, like the Apostle Tahar brought out, the Internet of Things. And they want to hook people up to that. All right. Right now, you got, the smartphone. All right. You got the smart vehicle. Okay. You got the smart refrigerator. Okay. You got smart locks. You can't go into certain buildings unless you have a badge and it, scan it. All right. So the system is already there. All right. And Esau, Edom, all right, he wants to try to, make this transition as smooth as possible. Okay. And a part of them doing that, doing the transition as smooth as possible, a part of that is order out of chaos. All right. A chaos that's generated by them, and they already have the solution already. Okay. So at least they do plan on collapsing the society. All right. And then they're going to try to get the M.O.T.B system up and running. Okay. They plan on C-hipping. All right. The majority of the people with a C-hip. All right. And then they be like, and then they're going to be like, go ahead and, function in this society as regular. All right. That's why they're going to roll out the M.O.T.B at the end. All right. So that's the last step for the beast system. All right. To be complete. All right. You already have, you got to show your ID, to get on the internet. All right. Everything is censored. Okay. You need your biometrics. All right. You got the flat cameras. All right. You got, the data centers. All right. Which the data centers is going to be hooked up with the 5G. All right. And then the 5G is going to be tracking people's C-hips in real time. All right. Paired with those flat cameras. All right. So the system is already here. All right. But it's going to be a culture shock when Esau Edom finally, pushes that pretty much forwards prophecy. Okay. Where he makes it a mandatory thing. Let me get that. Revelations 13 and 16. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. And we know, all right, according to, the scriptures, all right, going into, the breakdown of the root words. All right. We've pinpointed through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai, through the apostles' teaching on down. We pinpointed what the M.O.T.B is. Okay. It's a physical device. Okay. That they're going to try to have everybody implement in their right hand. And then you have the Neuralink, all right, in the forehead, which they said that the Neuralink surgery, it's a fast procedure. All right. So they plan on, stamping the mass majority of the people. And that's really what's brewing right now. Okay. Is them getting geared up and prepared. Okay. And they're going to couple that with the collapse of the society, because the current system can't be still in place, all right, when they implement the digital. Okay, and that was, them, the whole reason why, they push, the cryptocurrencies and all that stuff, that whole fad, all right, is so they can get people used, to what's coming, that universal basic income. Okay, and like they said, I believe it was either Kyle Schwab or one of them, all right, Edomites, they say you will own nothing to be happy. 15-minute cities, okay, a credit system to where, if you eat too much meat, or if you eat too much a certain food, then they can limit you. All right, your credits won't work. All right, it's pretty much it's a more higher level of slavery, pretty much. All right, and he's gonna make it a mandatory thing. If you don't do it, all right, you're gonna be an enemy to the society. You're not gonna be able to function. Okay, I'm gonna read that again, Revelation 13, and jump down to 17. It says, "And that no man might buy or sell, save he that hath the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." So you won't be able to buy or sell without the device in your forehead or in your hand. Okay, and that's when Esau makes this C-hip mandatory, all right, that's going to be the end of this man's rulership, because that's going to be one of the final prophecies, and that's going to happen before Yahushua return. All right, is the M.O.T.B being made mandatory. Okay, and then the third World War, where the missiles get let off, and our Lord Yahushua is going to show up simultaneously to deliver the elect. Okay, but until then, there's going to be a period of testing. There's going to be a period of trial. All right, and Esau created the grid. He created this consumerism society, all right, wherein going to the store, that's the thing to do. As far as Esau made it to where the grocery store is pretty much the kicking spot, or the mall, or somewhere where you got to purchase. Okay, and these people that's in the world that's not putting it off, all right, they're gonna have the urge to go buy and shop and sell, all right, and they're gonna be presented with an option to take the device, all right, and the majority of the people of the earth are gonna fail that test, all right. The only ones that are gonna pass and be kept, from receiving, that mark that's gonna defile you with no repentance, all right. The only ones that are gonna, avoid that are the elect. Okay. Let me get that. This is what Yahushua said to those that keep the faith in him and that endure unto the end. Okay. And we're waiting for this society to collapse. All right. It can happen any moment. But while we're here, we still have to function in the spirit. We still got to handle, our day-to-day, get our daily bread. While we're here, we're getting our house in order. Okay, we're trying to abound in the spirit. We're trying to grow. All right, but when that time comes where the Lord pulled a plug on America, that's going to be it. All right, the time of judgment, the time, like no other, is going to be upon us. Okay, and there's going to be no more teaching. The family of the word is going to be full effect. All right, but this is Revelation 3:10. It says, "Because thou hast kept the word of my patience." All right, and the word patience goes into suffering. All right, in this truth, the Lord puts you through suffering more frequently than the average person. All right, and the Lord does that out of love, because if we go into Jacob's trouble and we haven't had no type of experience with adversity, all right, we're going to crumble. Just like these people in the world, they have no experience. They're not going through, the hardening that Yahweh Shema Shai is putting his hopeful elect through. Okay. But the hopeful elect, the ones that endure it, all right, it says, "I will also keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth." Okay. So the hour is going to be a certain period where, we're going to be tried. We're going to be tested. okay, we're going to be tempted. All right. Esau, Edom, his convenience, okay, or trusting in Yahweh Shema Shai, all right, and leaning onto the Spirit and knowing that, the Lord got us, all right, because these people that take the C-hip, the direct judgment of that is the missiles. That's why the C-hip comes first in prophecy, all right, as far as chronological order, the C-hip comes first, all right, then the destruction, all right. So, hey, man, the Lord, he has that preserved for the wicked. All right. But as for the hopeful elect, the Lord, is going to keep his elect from that. All right. Let me get another precept real quick. All right. Because we just read, the hour of temptation, a time period where, we're going to be tested. It's going to be, you're going to see people buying and selling. You're going to see people laughing with the M.O.T.B. You're going to see people eating. You're going to see people turning up with the M.O.T.B., buying new vehicles and this and that. All right. And on top of that, we're going to be faced with not being able to just go and grab food where we're usually able to. All right. But the Lord is going to provide in these times. All right. This is room for Yahweh Shema Shai, to work his work. Okay. This is Isaiah chapter 10 and 20. It says, and it shall come to pass in that day, all right, which we're in that day now, that the remnant of Israel, all right, those that are predetermined to be delivered, the elect, and such as are escaped of the house of Jacob, okay, salvation is only for the house of Jacob, all right, it says, shall no more again stay upon him that smote them, all right, and we're up under Esau, Edom, all right, and he smote us as far as, we've been in a captivity, all right, and we've been, amalgamated in this man's society. All right, we have to go to Esau, Edom for the one of all things. All right, we're downtrodden. We're oppressed. All right, we're being attacked. All right, in every angle, spiritually, mentally, the music, the things we eat. All right, but this is what the Lord said. It says, shall no more stay again. It says, shall no more again stay upon him that smote them, but shall stay upon the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. All right, so that's, the Lord is making that transition now. That's why we woke up. All right, so now we can, we will no longer depend or rely on the so-called white man and his wicked society and his system, his grid that he has established. Now we can trust in Yahweh Shema Shai. All right, the living power. All right, the Lord, has woken us up. This is according to prophecy, that we will wake up. The spirit of life would enter into him, and great fear will fall upon our enemies, roughly paraphrasing. All right. So a part of us having the spirit, Esau knows that we don't need him. All right. But nevertheless, he's still going, the Lord is still going to allow him, to try to establish his NWO. Okay. And the majority of our people will succumb and be judged. All right. But the elect, the remnant, like we just read, are going to depend on the Lord, and the Lord is going to come through. All right. I want to, and we read in Revelations that shall try them. That word try means to test. Okay. Isaiah 10 and 21, it says, the remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, unto the mighty power. For though thy people Israel be as the sand of the sea, yet a remnant of them shall return. Okay, so 2/3 will be cut off because they're not trying to get right with Yahweh Shema Shai. They're still in a society not preparing, all right, to leave everything behind. They're not preparing to get in the good graces with the Heavenly Father. All right. And they reject the prophets. They reject this truth. And they think nothing is going to happen. All right. That's why the scriptures say, the simple pass on and are punished. All right. That sudden destruction is on its way. All right. Esau, Edom, he gonna shake the society up And he's going to come down with great wrath, pertaining to Revelations 12 and 12. All right. The military and these mercenaries, they're going to be the ones administering and forcing the M.O.T.B upon people. And then Esau, Edom, he's going to have an excuse for the military to be out there because there's going to be an outbreak. All right. Like Resident Evil, there's going to be some sort of outbreak that Esau is going to push out there. And then the society is going to collapse simultaneously. So the M.O.T.B is going to be looking like, you know, the only thing that could save the day. All right. The medical, you got your medical on there. And on top of that, you got credit. So now you can buy and sell, you know. So Esau, he got this whole thing that, you know, I'm talking about the 1%. Okay. The elites, they got this whole, they've been planning this whole thing for years. All right. Yahweh Shema Shai was the one that gave him the idea to do this. All right. Because the Lord is in control of everything. All right. So, you know, they have that, you know, gradualism. Yahweh Shema Shai is the one that deals with gradualism, you know. But, you know, we're in a time where it's no longer tearing. You know, they just going to roll this thing out. We're going to see, you know, prophecy in real time. Okay. But as for us, you know, we got to continue to rely on Yahweh Shema Shai, you know, and go through the test and pass it. All right. Because that's what the Lord wants to see is faith. Okay. And faith can't be known, you know, when everything is good. Okay. Faith is really tried, you know, when it looks bleak. All right. That's why the scriptures say the just shall live by faith and not by sight. Okay. Let me get this. This is Luke chapter 18 and 8. It says, I tell you, I'm going to read up, Salakia. Luke chapter 18 and 7. It says, and shall not the Most High avenge his own elect, going into the remnant, which cry day and night unto him? Yeah, you got to be serving Yahweh Shema Shai. All right, praying for the society to go down faster so the kingdom of righteousness can be established. You know, praying, you know, that the Lord have mercy on us. All right, because we've gone off and we go off. You know, we're praying for Yahweh Shema Shai, you know, ultimately so for us to be of the elect. Okay, but we got to continue to cry. Okay, we got to continue to do these lessons, continue to do the things that please Yahweh Shema Shai. So it says, and shall not the Most High avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear long with them? Yeah, you know, the Lord deals with gradualism, like we just said. All right, but the Lord is going to make do. All right, and the Lord is never on schedule, but he's always on time. You know, like they say, never on schedule, but always on time. Because you don't know exactly when the Lord does things, but when he does come through with the salvation, all right, the Lord come through right at the right moment, man. All right, so we got to continue to trust in the Lord. So it says, though he bear long with them, it says, I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. All right, so, hey, the Lord, hey, man, when the missiles go off, you know, the elect going to be delivered by the skin of the teeth. All right, right? Hey, you could see I'm just speaking, you know, as a man, but, you know, hey, it's going to be, you know, a real close deliverance, but it's not going to be close. That's just how precise Yahweh Shema Shai is with his timing. It's not going to be close at all, but it's going to seem close. You're probably going to see, you know, the shock wave. And then right when it gets like towards you, the Lord could beam you up. All right. So it says, I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth? All right. So that's what it is. You know, keeping the faith all the way to the end, man. All right. And, you know, the beautiful thing about it is it's already prophesied that the elect will do these things. All right. And there's, you know, compared to, you know, the rest of the world, the remnant is a small number. But if you look at the number itself, there's going to be millions of Israelites being delivered all over the world when Yahweh shall return. And we hope that we're part of that 1/3, that remnant, you know, which the 144,000, all right, is within that 1/3 portion. So there's going to be a lot of men, women, and children that believe, that are not prophets, that are going to be delivered too. All right. When they see the works of Yahweh Shema Shai, you're going to have men that have spiritual power in these end times to be able to feed those that believe. All right. Operating outside of Esau's society. Okay. Because the Lord wants to preserve his elect to deliver. So, yeah, that was that. Yeah, it's going to be a culture shock when Esau implements this thing. All right. Let me get the definition of culture shock real quick, just because I brought it up. Let's see what Google says. Culture shock. It says a feeling of confusion, anxiety, and doubt that happens when you move to a new place with a different way of life. So, you know, feeling confusion, anxiety, and that's what Esau wants to throw upon the people. Confusion, anxiety, fear, terror. All right. If you don't get the M.O.T.B, you're going to die. This and that. All right. And they're going to be forcefully, you know, hemming people up, throwing people in you know, sea camps. All right. Don't want to get the video flag, but throwing them in, you know, detention centers. All right. You know, they're going to be, you know, the beheadings. Okay. You know, the firing squad, all these things are going to be fully implemented. So that's what people's going to be in a state of confusion, anxiety, doubt, fear. All right. And then they're going to be funneled into taking that M.O.T.B. Now, the elect are going to be, you know, in the midst of the collapse, in the midst of the famine, in the midst of the chaos, anxiety, people bugging out. All right. But the difference is Yahweh Shema Shai is going to keep a stable mind on his elect. Isaiah 33:6. All right. And the elect are going to be able to deal, you know, with these hard times, you know, to ultimately be preserved, to be in a position to be saved. Okay. When the Lord returns. All right. But, yeah, man, we just got to prepare our minds to let everything go, you know, and fully rely on Yahweh Shema Shai. All these carnal possessions. All right. We're not going to be able to take these things with us to the salvation, to kingdom, in the chariot. Okay, we're not going to be able to take, we're not even going to be able to take our bodies, this flesh, with us. All right, you know, when Abba Ratazai, we be delivered. All right, so we got to be willing to just let all this shit go, you know. So Lord's will, this lesson's edifying. I want to say, call all Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai, Ba'Shem Akakwadash. Double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who taught us his truth, and who also were well. Peace and salutation to those of the hopeful elect. Shalom and a bar.